My name is Amena S from Team 1678, and I'll be the moderator for this presentation. In How to Make Your Team Brand Amazing, you will learn the meaning of a brand, understand what makes a great logo, and master writing a solid, passionate statement that will promote your team's mission. The presenters will discuss case studies of real-world designs, cover industry terms like logo system and responsive design, and discover your FRC team branding could reach. As we go through this presentation, feel free to leave any questions you have in the chat, and the presenters will answer your questions throughout the presentation or during the Q&A at the end. All right, I'll pass it on to your presenters, Liz Jung and Anna Shaposhnik.
Okay, thank you, Amina. Hey guys, my name is Liz. I'm currently a junior at the Bronx High School of Science, and I am in one of the only all-girls robotics team in the nation, FRC 2265, specifically the marketing department. And a fun fact, I also really like to read books on my Kindle during my free time.
And hello, my name is Anna. I'm from Team 846, the Funky Monkeys, and I'm an alumni of the Ivy Union Young Academy. And I'm an alumni of Team 846, the Funky Monkeys, and currently I'm in the USC Ivy Union Young Academy for Arts, Technology, and the Business of Innovation, and a freelance graphic designer. And you'll see some of my work in the next slides coming up. So this was Liz, and some of her work. And this was me, and some of my work. So let's start right in. What is graphic design? Now, please type in the chat what you currently think graphic design means to you, or what you think it is. More importantly, we'll also be discussing why does graphic design matter? Let me pose you this question. Why isn't everything in the world just black text on white background? Wouldn't that be so much easier? Wouldn't everything just be so simple? I see some things coming in. Art, logo design. Yes, those are all great parts of graphic design. But overall, what do you think graphic design is, and why does it matter? Why do you need to make things pretty, for example? A lot of people would answer that graphic design is making things pretty. But why does that matter? Why does anything in the world need to be pretty? Additionally, some people might say that graphic design is organizing information. Well, why do we need to organize information? You can see some people are saying, Katie's telling a visual story. That's great, that's absolutely right. But what does telling a visual story actually help you do in the end? What is that magic thing that graphic design does? Well, graphic design is communication. It's everything about creating that poster, making sure that the information is organized, making sure it's pretty so that it catches someone's eye, and finally making them do something, making them do an action like going to your website, going to your event, or whatever other thing that your design needs them to do. So graphic design overall is communication, and everything about design ties back into that one goal. So when you're making something, always think about, is this communicating what I want it to be communicating right now? And are the person who's looking at this design going to be doing what I want them to do? We're going to watch a short 5-minute video about why graphic design matters. A lot of people don't really know what design does in their life. You know, it's kind of just makes things pretty, kind of makes advertisements look interesting on TV, maybe makes your textbook look a little less boring. But design actually has some really interesting real-life impacts. So let's watch this video.
There's this moment at the Oscars, right before La La Land was mistakenly awarded Best Picture, where you can really tell that whatever Warren Beatty is looking at doesn't make sense.
For Best Picture.
He knew something was wrong, but he wasn't sure. But here's an idea. What if better typography could have prevented this whole snafu? Let's walk through what that could have looked like.
Moonlight.
We know from this shot that the announcement card looks something like this. The card is serving two purposes. On one hand, it's a beautiful souvenir for the winner, and on the other hand, it's a cue card for a very high-pressure public presentation. So how do you make this easier to read in front of 30 million live viewers? Well, let's look at how the card compares to the line that the announcer has to say. We read things from top to bottom, but at the top is Oscars. That's not useful information for the people on stage at the Oscars.
That's like a few milliseconds of extra time that those presenters have to go through to, when they're presenting, they have to go through all this information.
That's Benjamin Bannister. He's a graphic designer who put together an alternate design for the announcement card.
It's like driving on the side of the road. You literally have a few seconds to read all the signs and make sure you get the essential information, otherwise you're going to make the wrong turn.
Best actress should be the first thing on the page. Make it a little easier to read, and now the presenters have a clear sign that they've got the wrong card. But this still treats the winner with the same emphasis as the movie they appeared in, which, while it's nice to have, is really just extra context. You solve that by making the name of the winner the biggest thing on the page. If the presenters were given this card, one of two things would have happened. Their eyes would have first read Best Actress or Emma Stone, not La La Land. You can apply the same fix to the card that prompted Steve Harvey to crown the wrong person Miss Universe in 2015.
I have to apologize.
No bad typography, no confusion, no embarrassing mix-up. The consequences of bad graphic design extend far beyond award shows. In the fall of 2000, the supervisor of elections for Palm Beach County, Florida, was tasked with designing a ballot with more candidates than could fit on a single column. It wound up looking like this. It was called a butterfly ballot because of the way the text occupied 2 columns. If you were voting for Bush, the form made enough sense. To pick the first candidate, you punched in the first bubble. But then, to vote for the second candidate on the list, Al Gore, you had to punch in the third bubble. See the problem? The Palm Beach Post estimated that over 2,800 Gore voters accidentally voted for Pat Buchanan.
A number of voters here in Palm Beach County have filed lawsuits asking for a new election because they claim that they either voted for the wrong candidate or double punched their ballots because of confusion over the ballot design.
Bush won Florida by a margin of 537 votes. Better typography here arguably could have changed U.S. history. Graphic designer Michael Beirut put together this version of what that ballot could have looked like. It uses the same format, but consolidates information horizontally so that you can fit all the same candidate names in the same amount of space. Instead of there being 2 conflicting visual paths to follow, there's just one. There's also a lesson here for public health. When it comes to health, there's probably no single piece of household typographic design that's as common as this one, the orange prescription bottle. These have been around since just after World War II, and they haven't changed much, apart from the addition of a child safety cap in the 1970s, but they are not the easiest things to read. Just look at how information is prioritized here. The pharmacy branding is often the first and biggest thing on the label, which is fairly unimportant information for the user. The rest of the text on the label is small, and it's all the same size and weight. Even these confusing numbers, which the user doesn't need at all, get the same amount of emphasis as everything else. On top of that, some key warnings are printed on hard-to-read color combinations, like black on dark red. Put all of that on a curved bottle that you have to rotate to read, and you're left with a pretty unfriendly design. A design student named Deborah Adler created a model for what a new and improved pill bottle could look like. She called it Clear RX. She was inspired after her grandmother took her grandfather's medicine by accident. And that's a common problem. Experts estimate that there are 500,000 cases per year in the US of people misreading prescription bottle instructions. In Adler's design, the branding moves to the bottom, and the most important information for the user is big at the top. Adler also included color-coded rings so that the packaging clearly distinguishes between users, not just between medications. The extra surface area on the back allows for space to be dedicated to warnings for the user. Target bought this design and rolled it out in 2005 to positive reception. But 10 years after that, Target sold its pharmacy business to CVS, and the new pill bottle disappeared. Stories emerged afterward that some users had actually fished their old Target bottles out of the trash because of how much they liked them. Others took to Twitter, and CVS has said that it's developing a new, similar model, but it hasn't released it yet. As with a lot of designs, it's hard to notice the things that are done well until they aren't there anymore.
I think it was a good moment to show people and educate them on the fact that design does matter. Most people seem to forget it's not a really big deal until something like this happens. I mean, designers are there to help prevent things like this from happening.
So, would different typography have totally changed outcomes in any of these cases? Maybe. But if you're Warren Beatty, or Steve Harvey, or Al Gore, that's a pretty big maybe.
Wasn't that a really interesting video? I think that's one of my favorite videos because it really shows that everything around us is designed, and from anything you can pick up on your desk, like look around you. I don't know, I have an Elmer's glue bottle. Someone had to design this, for example. Or hand sanitizer. Someone had to design this label. Someone had to design my textbook. Someone had to design the computer I'm doing this presentation on. And everything around us has been designed by someone. And they all had to keep these concepts in mind, make it really easy for the user to use it properly, communicate whatever they're trying to say very clearly, and at the end of the day, just make the whole experience really seamless and easy and prevent some of those mix-ups that you saw in that video. Put down in the chat what you thought about that video. So now we're going to move into branding, which is what you're all here for. FRC branding is a really interesting thing to look at because it's very similar to kind of all the corporate branding that we see in the world today, and has a lot of similar principles that we can talk about. We're going to start by what is branding. Your brand is your promise to your customer. It's not just the logo. It's not just the posters that you create. It's everything around who you are as a community and an organization. It's your promise and your values and your characteristics that you are projecting to the world in your brand. And in our case, our customer isn't really a customer, right? Because FRC teams have a lot of people that we have to think about. That's volunteers, that's mentors, that's students, that's the teachers at our school, that's our sponsors. All of these groups of people are part of your brand and should be included and should be celebrated. And you have to really kind of think about the strategy behind your branding and tie in all of those people into your visual and language aspects of your brand. Let's look at an example that we probably all are familiar with. Whether you like it or hate it, Coca-Cola is a long-standing brand. And something really interesting that they did is that they really thought about all 5 senses when designing their brand. We're going to do a really quick activity with our panelists here, where each of us have chosen one or 2 senses. So I'm sight and sound, Liz is smell and touch, and Amena is taste. And we're going to do a little activity where we create a brand, or we create a little advertisement based on what these things are assigned to us. So I'm going to start. I'm looking at a beach shining in the sun. I see a person sitting next to the beach. They have a cooler open. They reach into the cooler. They pull out a Coca-Cola bottle. They look at it. It's bright red. It's shining. It's shimmering in the sun. They open it. Psh! The sound bubbles.
As I'm grasping onto the can, I feel the condensation seep into my fingers. I bring the can to my nose and take a deep whiff. It smells like sweetness and the generic taste of Coca-Cola.
I bring the soda bottle to my lips and I taste the sweetness of the Coca-Cola and the fizzy bubbles of Coca-Cola.
Awesome, that was great. And you can see how all of these elements are actually part of every single advertisement that Coca-Cola has ever done, or every single kind of messaging that they have done. They all thought about these aspects of making the whole experience something that's unforgettable and like Coca-Cola-esque. So think about how you can apply this to your team and how every single interaction, whether it be in the pits, or whether it's someone looking at your banner, or someone looking at your website or your flyer, all of those other touch points, how they can perceive you in all of these 5 senses. And maybe something creative can come out of that. So now we're going to move into logos, which are the face of your company and the face of your brand and FRC in this case. And we're going to talk about the different types of logos that there are and how they are used mostly in the commercial world in this video. So let's take a look at that. Can we please play the video? Sorry. Thank you.
The new Dell XPS. With a more compact design, it's even easier.
There are 3 specific types. The first type is the word mark. The word mark is the easiest one, and it's the one that we're all the most familiar with. I mean, John Hancock's signature is kind of a word mark, and it can look crisp, clean, and modern like the new Google logo looks. It can look somehow that it has roots in a shared heritage the way the Coca-Cola logo looks, you know.
The second is pictorial.
Pictorial logos often function as a kind of rebus, you know, it's a picture and you say what's in the picture and it sort of is identifying the name of the company, sometimes directly like Target, sometimes more indirectly like Lacoste.
The third kind is kind of the holy grail, abstract iconography.
It's everyone's favorite kind of category because it just seems almost like magic, you know. As a designer, people come to me and they'll say, oh, I want like something like the Nike swoosh. They think that the Nike swoosh was the Nike swoosh the day it was drawn, but it was nothing the day it was drawn.
The company that birthed Nike commissioned a design student named Carolyn to draw some ideas, and the Nike founders didn't really like them.
They sort of said, oh, let's use that one.
It wasn't like an overnight success.
And then they started putting on the science of shoes. The shoes were good, and then the genius of Nike's marketing apparatus made us further associate that product not merely with performance athletic gear, but with the very idea of athletic achievement itself.
And that's how, over a long time, a little mark means something big.
That's exactly how religious symbols work. It's obviously not just anything inherent in these shapes, but it's about what those shapes have come to represent in the minds of the people who are looking at them.
But there's a fourth type of logo that goes beyond these three types and can use elements of each of them. The logo system, a graphical framework that can have endless permutations. The first gigantically popular example of the logo system would be MTV. But Google's Daily Doodles are another great example of the logo system, a familiar mark that can also point to other ideas and issues. This approach all has to do with technological change.
It used to be if a company was doing a logo, there'd be this military operation by which it would be inscribed on all their equipment and on their airplanes and their retail facilities, and gold pins and cufflinks would be made for the executive suite and put on spittoons and ashtrays and the top of the skyscraper in which they dwell and on everyone's business card, right? Nowadays, none of that's as important as an email signature or your Twitter avatar or the little thing that sits next to your URL, and those things are much more ubiquitous and they can be changed at the drop of a hat.
Beirut used this system approach for his Hillary Clinton logo. We
wanted to have a mark reflect the electorate and reflect the issues. Those simple forms that comprise the H with the arrow in it are actually designed to hold not just two colors, say red and blue, but any colors you want.
The use of logo systems seems to be continually on the upswing now, probably because it allows the brand using it to expand the conversation beyond its own name.
The logo kind of reminds people that that's what our priority is today.
But at the end of the day, regardless of the shape, style, or system, it might not matter what your logo is.
It really is about thinking of these symbols as being empty vessels in a way, and then you pour the meaning into them.
So what's this all add up to? Basically, those fights people get in about new logos are pretty misguided.
They think they're judging a diving competition, but actually all these organizations are in swimming competitions. It's not what kind of splash you make when you hit the water, it's how long you keep your head above that water.
Logos need to have a long life, not win points in a discussion. 12 years after the birth of that Nike logo, Nike came back to that graphic design student, Carolyn, with a gift.
A Nike ring with her own trademark on it, the swoosh.
Thank you very much, it's beautiful.
And an undisclosed amount of Nike stock.
Wow.
In 1973, when it was designed, her pay was $35.
Awesome! Wasn't that a really interesting video? Put down in your chat what you thought. I think that video really just goes to show that FRC is really begging for us to use a logo system because, as you can see, they themselves use a logo system. Every year, when they create a new kind of theme, new kind of logo, they all have to tie it back to their base logo first, and those three shapes that they use in their original logo. And you can see here some of the past games and how, even though they all are very different because they all have to be very different themes, they really do kind of tie back into that main base first logo that we are all used to. And for our teams, what that means is that we get to update our branding every year to reflect some of those themes. First, we're going to look at some examples that are not FRC related, and then kind of dive into the FRC related ones. So again, Logo system is one concept that's extended into multiple ideas. In an FRC, it can be for each year's theme. These are Google Doodles, MTV, and as you saw in the video, the Hillary Clinton logo. This is another example of a logo system. Here, I created the sun that can be exchanged with different sports icons. And on the other side, this is the concept of responsive logo design. And responsive logo design just means that at different sizes and different scales, you have different versions of your logo to respond to that sizing. So for example, on a big banner, you could have that whole entire Sunny Valley snakes with the sun. And on a much smaller business card, you could have just that icon of the snake. And it could all be consistent across all of the mediums, but just be slightly different. Here are some more examples of how responsive logos are done in actual brands. Chanel, Coca-Cola, Nike does this. Here's an example from my team, Team 846, the Funky Monkeys. We sort of have a logo system where every year we design a new logo or a new iteration of our base logo with the monkey in some new situation that's based on the theme. And you can see here are some of the past ones like Steamworks, Power Up, and Rebound Rumble on this side. Sweet. Here's another example from Cardinal Robotics. They do a great job of kind of making a range of buttons with different themes, but still sticking to that base bird and bright red cardinal color imagery. You can see they also update their logo for certain events like LGBTQ+ month. Here we have the SVR branding that I did for Silicon Valley Regional. I also tried to kind of maintain a set of different lockups or different iterations of the logo. So you can see the rubber stamp, volunteer gift, colored logo, and banner graphic are all slightly different, but they all tie into the same base branding and the same visual language as each other. They're just slightly different to fit the different contexts. And at the top, you can see it went through a lot of iteration before I went to these final decisions. Here is the Cal Games logo. And the Cal Games logo is, Cal Games is an off-season robotics competition up here in NorCal. And each year they have a student-run competition to design the logo. And here are some of the past logos. So you can see down there is so we have Steamworks in the middle. We have Power Up on the very end. And you can see each of these have are very clearly on theme. They have clear shapes and they're really easily legible. So you can see these from a pretty far distance, and they're really kind of iconic in the way they look and the way they all connect back to each other under one theme and under one brand with the same colors and the same icons of that robot that's in the base logo that they have.
So let's take a look at this. Which logo do you think has been better designed and more effective? Logo A or logo B? Please type it in the chat. Well, the answer is logo B. Logo B is correct. Please go to the next slide. As you can see, the shape of your design remains static despite its color loss for logo B. When creating a design for your logo, you have to be prepared for essentially any kind of printing job. For example, if you were to promote your team via newspaper, your logo will evidently be shown only in these muted shades such as black, white, and gray. In order to prevent misrepresenting your logo and in order to continue to withhold its value, make sure that your logo has distinct and concrete features. As you can see on the right, logo B, the design has some ridges and some breaks in between the arcs and curves. There's some space between the circle in the middle and the arc on the top and the bottom. So even if the colors are not included, you can still distinguish it as your logo.
So, do you guys know the secret of the FedEx logo? Type in the chat. And don't spoil it for anyone. Just say yes or no. All right, if you don't know this already, your mind is about to be blown. So, if you see here, look between the E and the X. What do you see? Is it an arrow? That's right. The designer of the FedEx logo specifically made the X height, or the height from the top to the bottom of the X and the other lowercase letters, to match with the E so that he could create an arrow when he was designing this logo. And why would FedEx want a secret arrow in their logo? What do you think that represents? Right, it represents traveling forward and kind of transporting things, because that's what FedEx does. So I think it's really cool that they managed to hide that secret negative space arrow in their logo. And every time I see a FedEx cart passing by, I always notice that. So back to what a good logo will entail. So good logos must have recognizable silhouettes, use 1 or 2 readable fonts, and limit to 1 or 2, use a limited color palette that can work on black and white backgrounds as well, and have a grayscale or black and white option. You can see previously we talked about that really effective logos are able to really easily switch from just one color to multicolor. But in this example, for example, the Cal Games logo had to be a little bit redesigned to be able to fit in black and white. And that's totally okay too. It takes a little bit more work on making sure that the person who's using your logo knows that they need to use the black and white version in black and white context and not just change the color of the original logo, but that's also an option you can take.
So your logo should follow these 3 key principles. It should be first adaptive, it should be simple, and lastly, it should be timeless. So no matter how many years go by, your logo will always stand with your brand. Make sure don't make it too primitive. For example, your logo shouldn't be simply just a circle or a square or like a simple one shape. Add a few touches and elements to it that will make your design extremely unique to make your team stand out. However, make sure your logo holds a sort of a degree of professionalism. Have a skilled graphic designer or perhaps a digital art specialist with experience, perhaps someone on your team, in order to get it done for you. And as you can see here, this is my robotics team, the FedEx logo. Analyzing this design, you can immediately note that the 2 official colors are green and purple. One of them is more dominant than the other. As you can see, the purple is going to be the background, while the green is the actual logo itself, as well as the font. We also did a play on our name. FE on the periodic table of elements stands for iron, so another name for our team is actually the Iron Maidens. Lastly, since we are actually an all-girls team, the robot is wearing a skirt. So here are some key points that you should take note of in designing a logo. 1, as you all saw on the previous slide, your design should have 1 or 2 team colors. One color is recommended to hold a bit more surface area as compared to the other. For the previous slide, you can see that for the maidens, the one color is more dominant as one is background, as the other is only the logo and the font itself. Too many colors in a single entity in one logo will look way too busy and not be attractive in promoting your brand. Second, your logo should be recognizable no matter where you are. For instance, if you're craving a McDonald's Happy Meal or you want a caramel latte or something, you can immediately recognize the signature yellow and red McDonald's logo shaped like an M. You can recognize it like meters away. Fast food franchises use this ideal a lot in order to attract customers that are on the road and looking for a quick and cheap meal. Lastly, you should have a consistent font. Again, it's this entire concept of keeping the logo clean and simple. Having too many fonts will look way too busy, the same way having too many colors or lines disrupt the simplicity that we're going for.
Awesome. And now we're going to show you a little Easter egg. You can see even the Apple logo had humble beginnings. You can see on the very left, that was one of the very first iterations of like the logo. And you can see it just kind of looks like a very old like apple picking orchard logo type of, old illustration style. And I think it's very interesting to realize that they like started with something like that before they got to their final logo. And you can see right now, the Apple logo is like ubiquitous. It's something that we all recognize and is regarded as one of the best logos ever created because of just how simple the shape is, how easy it is to recognize, and how clearly Apple has defined their entire visual system and their entire brand and their values from what they believe in all the way to this tiny little logo that represents them. So one cool thing about logo design is that there's also some like technical knowledge and cool little tricks that you should know when you're creating a logo. So for example, let's look at the square and circle. Which one feels like it has more weight, more visual weight? Which one feels bigger right now? That's right, it's really the square. It just feels a little bit bigger, a little bit heavier than the circle right now, even though they're perfectly aligned, as you can see in this slide. But here, when we've adjusted for the optical alignment of these two shapes, we've made the circle a little bit bigger. And you can see now they actually feel more equal in weight. Wouldn't you agree? You can see that right now, these two are not perfectly aligned as they were in the first example. And this is something that is used everywhere. Let's take a look at the Google logo, and any font for that matter. If you type out anything in a text editor and put down a top and bottom line, you'll notice that all the circular shapes and circular parts of the font stick out below the X height. The X height being the bottom of any lowercase letter with a flat bottom. So like the bottom of the L, that would be the baseline, and then the X height would be at the top of an X, and then the very top would be the height of the ascenders, which means all the things that stick out above. You might also know that descenders are like the bottom of the G, which stick out below the line. So knowing all this, we can say that these little circular shapes stick out below the bottom of the baseline of this logo. And they do that for the same reason, optical alignment, so that those circular shapes don't feel too small compared to the boxier shapes. Other cool things that you might note is that a lot of fonts make sure that the horizontal lines are thinner than the vertical lines, because the vertical lines need to be a little bit thicker, not only for the reason that calligraphy often had thicker lines when you go on the downstroke, but also for the same reason of optical alignment. If you were to compare a horizontal bar and a vertical bar next to each other, you would notice that you'd need to compensate for the thickness of the horizontal bar because it felt a little bit thicker to you. So we're going to go into an example of a logo design process. Say you want to redesign your logo for your brand or your team, or you want to design a new one if you're a new team. So let's take a look at this. I designed a logo for Tesseract Initiative. It's an educational organization and we teach workshops for kind of robotics teams currently. And so we started by identifying our brand values, core goals, and themes. So you'll notice that we didn't start by diving into the sketching. We made sure that we got together a team, which means like a representative amount of people on your team. Make sure that you really do start in a team because it's important to get everyone's perspective on what your brand is, because FRC is such a community-based brand. It's all of the students, the mentors, everybody included in that. So brand values we selected, core goals we selected, and themes we selected. But another important thing is to prioritize some of these things. So we looked at our themes, for example, and we decided that dimensions was something that was really important to us. Multidimensionality, interdisciplinary kind of values that we wanted to portray. And so next up, we looked at a lot of different references. We created a mood board with some of our favorite logos from kind of the educational space, but also logos completely different, just logos that we thought vibed with our core goals and themes and business values that we always need to come back to reference when we're deciding what to do with the logo. So finally, we decided to find some visual connections, and our final logo brings together kind of a shape of a T, the corner of a square, and 4 directions. And you'll notice that our name Tesseract already has some implications, because if you know, Tesseract is a 4-dimensional cube. But we didn't want to go with that kind of cliche shape of a 4-dimensional cube that you see in textbooks. We wanted to have something a little bit more abstract. So you can see next we went into sketches, and we kept sketching and making sure that we go through all of the ideas that we have. This is a really important step. Make sure you get all the bad ideas out first, and then get into some of the better ideas. You can see one of the things we were considering at one point is having this kind of logo system where the name of the workshop, like Kinetic Media, is represented by a K and an M that were connected by lines to kind of show multidimensionality and kind of the Tesseract aspect of connecting two different worlds. But at the very end, we landed on this. And as you can see, it's kind of a cool, forward-thinking looking, like cutting-edge logo. It has all these 4 colors to represent the 4 directions of our workshops that we had at that time. It's kind of a corner of a cube that's pointing towards you, as well as a T. And I'd put this in the abstract logo category. And we went with that, and we created a website and all the touch points. You can check them out as well if you're interested. So how do you even make a logo, right? Like after you sketch something on paper and you have an idea. Well, you take it to a vector program. So what is a vector program? And why would logos need to be in vector? Why can't I use like MS Paint to make my logo? Well, if you zoom in a lot into something made in MS Paint or any other, like Photoshop is also raster, GIMP is raster if you know that program. Any photo that you take on your phone or with a camera, it's also raster. So if you zoom all the way in, eventually you'll see pixels, you'll see little blocks. And the difference between raster, which is those pixels that you see, and vector, is that vector is actually plotting mathematical curves. And those mathematical curves have, the equation of that curve. And if you scale it up or scale it down, it won't lose quality because the computer knows that it's that curve. And at any size, it can calculate that curve in good quality. So now you might be wondering, so where do I find a vector program? What does that even mean? You can see here examples of vector programs. Inkscape is a free vector program that we used on our team. And Adobe Illustrator is one that's paid, but if you have access to it through your school, it's another great program. That's the one I use currently. But both of them can do most of the same things. And one of the tricky things with vector programs is you really have to learn how to be able to place those curves and how to create all those intricate shapes. And if you're interested, you can email me at the very end. I have some cool games that you can play if you're interested in learning more about vector. But you can't just stop there. You need brand touch points. After you have a logo, you need to extend that across your entire team, across your entire brand. And remember all those 5 senses. So let's look. Our team, Team 846 The Funky Monkeys, has a Photojournal yearbook that we print at the very end of every year to summarize all of what happened in that year. It's a really great souvenir for anyone. It's also really great at interviews or internship opportunities where we can show this off and explain what our team is all about. It's also really great for judges when we're talking to people in the pits, at competitions, or just any community outreach work. This is a really great book to have. It's kind of flashy, it's fun, and it's a really great opportunity for the media people on your team to learn how to print and prepare documents for printing. And the program we use for that is called Scribus. It's an open source desktop publishing tool, which I highly recommend. It's free. It's pretty good at what it does. Yeah. Here is our crate and robot art. We extended our brand to a fun way, which is painting our robot crate for out of state competitions. It really stands out among the crowd of other crates that are mostly just like gray or wood colored. So it was a really fun time for all the people on our team who love to paint and do art. It's a really great off-season project. Another thing is our annual robot vinyl panels. You can see they're just thin polycarb panels with printed sticker paper on them that we order from a company. Also pretty simple to do, it's not that simple to do, but it's really fun to see the end result. And I really recommend you take that challenge up just to spice up your robot. You can also use it to protect some of maybe like electrical components in some cases. So you can see here, we also went beyond the canvas, so to speak. We had the bright star that went outside our robot, like kind of outside any built components of our robot to really spice it up when it's riding around on the field and you can see this big star. It's really fun to see that. We also have document design. Again, here's our branding once again coming through in just the fonts that tie into that year's theme and the colors. Here's our recruitment and social media posters. We had, for a long time, a teacher pun recruitment series where you kind of put up posters based on which classroom and which teacher it is, and you make a pun with their last name. Here, apparel, stickers, buttons, all the cool things that we see at competitions and at pits. So here was last year's theme with the Star Wars, kind of Star Wars plus sustainability. We wanted to make sure we capture both of those aspects. And it was a really fun thing. We also do a biannual newsletter and team photo. So you can see on the left is the newsletter, and on the right is at the end of the year, we offer kind of a certificate and a team photo, and everyone signs it, and it's really fun. And here's our website that was recently redesigned. It's really cool. It kind of ties back into all of that branding that we do previously, and those bright colors come through. All of our information is presented very clearly. But one other thing you might not think of is, what about like sound branding, right? We did a YouTube series called Monkey Box. Check it out as well on YouTube. And if you play this video, you can see that we tied in our branding to that kind of funky feel of the name Funky Monkeys. And here is the opening sound and animation.
Hey guys, welcome to Monkey Box. I'm your host Junha. And I'm Sam.
Yeah, and you can see everything is very stylistically very consistent. You can see even with the setup we have there, it's very clean. You have the white background, the yellow table, and the red shirts. Other really cool creative applications you can do with branding just range far and wide. For example, this team 4039, Makeshift Robotics in Ontario, Canada, they do something really special every year at competitions. And they have these big striped shirts, and from the beginning of a competition, they wear black and white shirts, and then as the competition progresses, they have different shirts that they put on that gradually bring color into their group photos, which I think is a really clever and like probably time-consuming application of this. I read on their website that they have to like hand sew this every year, and it's kind of a fun thing their team does. And I think it's a really great example of just team tradition and a very strong representation of their brand, of their name, Makeshift. You can see if you go to their website and read some of their messaging, it's very clearly portrayed. You can see that it's meant to symbolize the shifting the perception of science and technology, the same way that prisms shift the spectrum of light. They also say, as the event proceeds, our team gradually starts changing. Splashes of color appear on our shirts or our pits. We go through a transition phase where the grays are gradually drowned out by brighter colors. By the final day of competition, we are in the full kaleidoscope of team colors. And I think it's a really cool and creative representation of a brand. So think about cool things like that. Like, for example, if your robot team was named like Eclipse Robotics, or I don't know, like something themed to like moons, maybe each of your team shirts could have a different like crescent shape of the moon, and maybe as the competition progresses, you wear those, or like all these cool things that you can just like out of the box apply your brand to. Another great example, or things that you should implement, is a great brand guideline. So some of good examples of these are Team 254, the Holy Cows, Team 1538, and you can see here Space Cookies as well. They have really great examples of brand guidelines. And what this really helps you do is that if your marketing lead leaves, or if they're graduating, you can pass down that knowledge of how your logo should be used, what things are consistent throughout. And this really helps center the entire team around those guidelines. So how can we apply this to our teams? Let's go back to Liz. Oh, sorry, this is me. One cool framework that I found is called Primal branding. It's by a graphic designer, Patrick Hanlon, and he summarizes the whole aspect of the multifaceted brand and all the senses and all these things that go into a brand into these 7 points. And I think these are very good 7 points to remember. So number 1 is the creation story, which is how, where, and why. What is your history? Where did you start with? For example, Team 846 started in garages, and we put that on our website too. So if you have a really interesting creation story, that's a great thing to highlight. Number 2 is creed, your core beliefs. What is it that you want to change about science and technology? Why does your team exist? Number 3 is icons, which are all those sensory connections, your logo, your brand, but also everything else, sight, sound, touch, taste, smell. Does your team regularly eat pizza? Is that something that's like just part of your team and you like make fun of it and stuff like that? Like that's also an icon. Number 4 is rituals. How do you act? What do you celebrate? So Makeshift has that ritual of wearing those different stripes. What does your team do? What are some of the events that are unique to your team? Number 5 is a lexicon, which are special terms and words, memes, inside jokes of your team. And those are really important to cultivate as well. You can think about like well-known brands where if you don't know like the verb Google it, like you're living under a rock, you know. You need to learn those like special lexicon, special terms that brands create for us to remember them by. Number 6 is like non-believers. This is mostly for actual like maybe like vegan brand versus carnivores, Mac versus PC. I'd say in FRC this isn't something that we focus on, but in the corporate world, you might want to highlight that your competitor or like make fun of your competitor or something like that, like Mac did with PC back in the day. Number 7 is leader, which is the faces of your brand, the hero, the innovator. This is like Steve Jobs for Apple, but for FRC, I'd say you don't really have like one leader. You just have like a community of students, so it's also not as applicable, but you can think of that, maybe like your mentor or other like figures of your team.
So, what is one new thing that you learned that you want to apply to your team? Please put it in the chat. Okay, so let's continue. Now, next slide, please. Okay, so now let's go more in depth on the illustrious and beautiful art of creating a brand in the form of words. Your brand statement essentially guides your brand identity. What do you stand for? What is something so important and necessary that the audience should know? It describes the audience your brand will relate to, the attributes it highlights, and the character it conveys. So your statement should display simplicity, formality, and power. Take a look at this example here. Oh, yeah, go back, please. Okay. The Femaidens is a team of passionate young women dedicated to empowering the next generation of female engineers. So our robotics team is most notable for our strive for greater representation of female gender in STEM fields. So we decided to showcase that through our statement. As you can see, we do not include any unnecessary information, and we go straight to the point. This is because additional info can be provided in business plans, press packets, and pamphlets. Here we have a version of our one-page pamphlet. It's a little hard to read, but just take note of the enormously lengthened amount of words and sentences that we have as compared to the statement. So all side information or sub-info that you would like to introduce to the public can, of course, be showcased, but simply not in the statement itself. So let's take a look at the scenario. You are the new owner of a car dealership. You're trying to create a brand, but are stuck between two statements. Which one will you use? So statement number 1 says, Mercedes-Benz is the world's leading provider of premium products and premium services for individual mobility. Statement number 2 says, Mercedes-Benz is a really great car dealership that helps everyone find the car of their dreams. We're open on business days from 9 to 5. We also serve coffee. So which one's better? Please put it in the chat. Statement 1 or statement 2? So the first statement is actually tremendously much better. Although Mercedes-Benz is a car dealership, you don't explicitly see those two words in the statement itself. The audience probably already knows what your brand is trying to sell or showcase, including that it is a car dealership, is unnecessary. However, what this statement includes is a unique baseline and words such as premium and leading provider to truly showcase what they want to sell. It essentially shows why you should look into this brand and why it is better than all the rest of the car dealership brands. And obviously, the second statement uses general words that can really describe anything. They are baseless claims that are made about this brand. Also, the last two sentences are entirely unnecessary. They can be added into the description, but simply not the statement. Next slide, please. So next is the description. Your description feeds off of what your brand statement is. So what do you do? What is the purpose of your brand? How did your brand start? It gives us more knowledge on who you are and what you do. So the description is your team story. In creating a description, ask yourself, what's your reason for being? What's your history? What's your corporate mission? Here we have the Iron Maiden's description that is shown on our press packet as well as on our pamphlet. So let's break it down and find the elements that makes this a stable and memorable description. So we are the Phi Iron Maidens, the Bronx High School of Sciences all-girls robotics team. So as you can see, we always start off the description with the actual name itself, what we're trying to represent. Together, we engineer and build robots to compete in competitions held by First Robotics. So what's your reason for being? That essentially answers that question. That's what you want your audience to know about you, right? If we skip a little forward, in addition to our annual competition season, we host and attend outreach events that encourage girls from a young age to pursue STEM careers. So that answers what is your history, in a sense. When you're writing a description and you're trying to answer what is your history, don't try adding. It's better to veer off of writing anything with time periods or like stating the actual year or date, because that can be actually added in other places of your press pack instead of your one paragraph description, because we're trying to concise our information as much as possible. So we're reinforcing our mission to recruit girls despite typical gender roles with a long-term goal of promoting gender equality in STEM. So that's essentially what's your corporate mission. That's what we stand for. So that's what we put as our last sentence. Now let's hear what Simon Sinek has to say about logos and brand promotion.
Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order of the information. What it proves to us is that people don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This explains why every single person in this room is perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But we're also perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a DVR from Apple.
So some FRC opportunities for graphic designers beyond your team. We're going to do a quick wrap up. You can design for your local on and off season regionals, volunteer videography, logo, social media help. Feel free to ask me about that. Here are some resources. You can screenshot this. These are some of my favorite things to learn more about design. As well as you can screenshot this last slide for asking us any questions. And now I'm going to pass it back off for the wrap up.
All right, thank you, Anna and Liz, for this great presentation. We'll be taking questions right now, so feel free to leave any questions you have in the chat, and our presenters will be answering them. In the meantime, I'll ask a question. What are some ways FRC teams can be creative with graphic design and implement it in new areas of their team?
Sure, yeah. I mean, just looking for new mediums to apply it to, like really fun things like, I don't know, like safety posters or like changing the design of your clock in your workshop. Like you can apply your branding to so many different things and like so many things that you may not have think of before.
Also, I guess from personal experience, it can FRC teams can actually expand their team by perhaps creating a sub department. For example, for my team, the Maidens, last year we actually founded our marketing department, which essentially goes through a bunch of graphic design for our pamphlets, for our newsletters. So it holds the ability to get your artwork out there and experience new things. So yeah.
Awesome. Going back to the Apple logo that you showed us and the progression of it, do you think that like that old logo at the time was actually a better fit rather than a simple the Apple logo that we know today?
Well, I'd say like context is important, but I think at the end of the day, like I guess if you are surrounded by logos that look like that, or if that's something that's really like recognizable, or if you want to fit the vibe of that kind of old-fashioned looking like bottle kind of shaped logo, I think that's important. But at the end of the day, like what they've grown into, it's really important for them to have their new sleek logo.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for presenting.
Thank you so much.
It was a great presentation.